Thus we begin officially. And so how about we start what appears to me the top left, and we'll go with Naisha. Do you want to enter?
Sure. Well, first of all, I realized, because I'm still not so tech savvy, that I sent a big warm welcome, hello, and greeting to my panelists, so my co-hosts. So let me repeat that to all of you outside of the typing, that it's just an absolute joy to be among all of you tonight, among my esteemed colleagues, co-authors, inspiration, mentors, and friends, as well as among the publishing crew that had faith in us and took on this project and really pushed hard to get this out. We are incredibly grateful for that, Scott and all of you at Steiner Books. And of course, all of you here listening tonight. So far, we have 143 here live, and I know many more planning on attending later. And I also saw for our hosts and panelists here that our amazing support system, both Kieran and Annika, are on tonight listening as well. So I want to give a shout out to these two amazing women, that there's absolutely zero way this book would have been birthed without them. They were they were the forceps, they were the doulas, they were it all. So with that, before I go into my spiel, Stephen, I know I would love for you to give a quick intro, maybe to this group, and then we can decide who wants to go first on the actual, part of this.
Yeah, thanks, Naisha. I just would also say hi to everybody. It's such a privilege to have this opportunity to, I guess this is the first time we're formally sort of launching the book, right? So after a whole year of work. So yeah, it's just great to see everybody here. And yeah, just to let everybody know, this was, a project that took place over a year, and so much volunteer time, and people really donated so much effort and goodwill to this project, and to see it finally here and done is really amazing. And it's just been great to work with everybody. Really special. It's a special effort this was. Yeah.
I love it. Well, then I might just jump in. I know that Scott wanted us to talk a little bit about what brought each of us to this project. We talk about it a little bit in the book itself. So this is, of course, a plug to get you guys to get and read the book. By the way, that this book is not bringing prosperity to us financially. It's bringing prosperity to helping launch future educational platforms and clinical trials. And so we all will be prosperous from this approach. So your purchase of this book is moving the stewardship of this powerful plant medicine and integrative oncology forward. So I do want to start off with that. And, for me, one of the coolest things about this project is I've personally worked with mistletoe for about 16 years now. I know that I'm sort of an infant compared to most of my colleagues, both here live tonight or co-authored on this book. And so I feel like I'm still learning something new every single day. And for sure, every time we get together to co-facilitate a training together. And it was when week 7 came together. It started out with 6 of us, but Mark joined us on this last one, which was perfect. We rounded it out to that good lucky number. So that was great. But when we all came together, oh, here comes Dr. Blanding, perfect timing. But when we all came together, I think none of us really knew each other and knew how to be with each other. We knew of each other, but we weren't sure, when you bring together 7 uniquely distinct personalities, we weren't sure how this was going to roll. But the beauty of it is the moment we all realized there was an absolute deep kindred spirit. And that, I don't know about my colleagues, but we've talked about this sort of in our meetings together, that it feels like this book brought us together, this plant brought us together, and this mission brought us together, and that we are somehow the voice of, or the steward for, this medicine reaching wider audiences, which includes all of you listening tonight. And so we all definitely share the experience and the passion for this medicine, and the way of even thinking about and utilizing and applying this medicine is what informs us as being better practitioners, as well as better care to ourselves, because it's not your typical protocol, this approach. And it's one that really encourages a relationship. and a deepening exploration of self and other and of this medicine. And it sounds a little esoteric, but when you dive into the really juicy chapters of this book, I think you will find what I'm speaking to is very true. I wish I had her quote with me right now, but one of the doctors who's gone through my training, she sent me a private message not too long ago that just basically said she received her book in the mail. And as she took it out of its package, her hands literally started to vibrate. And this is a woman who would say that she does not think or feel in those woo-woo kind of ways. And yet she said there was something about this, and she poured through the pages of that book. And she said she actually wept at different times because it spoke so much more to humanity than just about a plant medicine. And that our essences as providers, as well as stewards of this medicine, really came forth. And I don't know if we could ask for anything better. I'm pretty darn proud of what we pulled out, especially with 7 people trying to knock this out in a short period of time with, as Stephen said, the help of so many. And so in my work through this book, we all got to kind of digest it and integrate it throughout the entire process. I contributed to chapter 1 with Stephen and really took on chapter 5 and 9. So chapter 1 was more the introduction and history of oncology. Chapter 5, the test and assess, moving beyond the tumor and moving more into the terrain assessment model. Chapter 9, what I wrote on was more about bridging the treatments, really showing how these therapies play very, very well with others. And then chapter 12 was sort of the what does the future hold? And then I was lucky enough to kind of contribute on a few other chapters in the appendices, as well as my colleagues contributing on mine. I felt like we did this as a collective. And to be part of something like that is quite extraordinary. So that's my spiel of what brought me to this medicine and brought me to this extraordinary group and brought me to continuing to be curious and want to keep growing my understanding of anthroposophical medicine and naturopathic medicine, integrative oncology, and mistletoe therapy, especially how it weaves into our modern oncology practices of today. So thank you.
Great. Thank you, Naisha. Thank you, Naisha. Okay. Who shall be next? I like to go just by who's on my right, which looks like Dr. Mark Hancock.
All righty, thanks. Appreciate that. And first, before I start, I just want to say I'm just tickled to see so many of my beloved patients in the audience. It's great to have you. Thank you for taking a little time out. So why this book? I'm just honored that I got invited to help craft one of the chapters. I got to do the fun chapter, the advanced use of mistletoe, injecting into tumors and using it in unique, clinically challenging situations. And yeah, we do a little bit of that here in Atlanta. And about 16 years ago, well, I knew about mistletoe before, but really just about it, because I'd studied the anthroposophic worldview for a while before that, but I had never seen any anthroposophic medicine in action. And it was actually as a third-year med student that I got to see both at the same time with about one of my favorite people in the world, who's now on the other side of the threshold, Morris Orange in England at Park Atwood. So he had created, with the help of others, a retreat center there, and took me under his wing as a little third-year med student. And I had just the time of my life, like really was there every minute that I had available. And it was just beautiful to see how seriously he took mistletoe, like how much research was there, was so moving. It was also beautiful to see how much of a relationship with the plant and a respect and a communion with it that he had. And I feel like I've started that as well. Like these host trees make a difference depending on the host tree, what effect the mistletoe will have in a patient. And picking that is a nuanced process. And I appreciated that right away with him. And then the other thing that really just gave me this most beautiful picture of medicine was seeing how he sculpted these team meetings. We had these multidisciplinary team meetings with physicians, nurses, art therapists, movement therapists with curative eurythmists, biography therapists, as well as even the gardener and the chef would all come together, and we would hold the patient in our hearts and talk about what their needs were, and talk about them from more of a fourfold aspect of not just the physical, but also what are their life processes left, what are their soul processes like, what is the individuality needing, and how are these all relating to each other, and what needs to happen from each of those aspects. And then we sculpt a care plan for the next week or two to go forward. We're trying to do that on a weekly basis here. It's actually, we put a lot of time into that. We pay all of our staff time. We have a meeting once a week for an hour here. So to me, that was a big inspiration. I've never seen anything like it in my life. So my inspiration is to create a retreat center like that, something that's inpatient, to really change medicine here in the US so that we have integrative options. And I think this book is it's a piece, it's a first step of many forward. And I'm super excited to be a part of that.
Sorry. Thank you, Mark. We had one question which I thought was good. Would be nice for each of you to sort of say where you are, where you're speaking from, and.
Sure. Yeah, I'm in Decatur, Georgia, which is around Atlanta, northeast.
Great. Naisha?
Sort of nomadic, but home for me right now is near Puerto Vallarta, Mexico.
Beautiful. Thank you. Paul, okay, could you introduce yourself a little bit now?
Sure, yeah. I'm a naturopath, and I am in Towson, Maryland, which is just north of Baltimore, which has been in the news plenty. So, when I reflect on my contribution to this book and how it happened, it's hard. It's a hard question for me to answer. It's pretty mysterious to me. My first passion in life, I would have to say, was plants. I couldn't wait to get out in the woods, out in the fields after school. And I was just a little budding botanist collecting plants, trying to identify them, trying to figure out why they grew next to each other, what they did. And that ultimately led to my interest in chemistry. And I went on to chemical engineering. And I sort of drifted really deep into the kind of like obscure, engineering aspects, until I realized I had gotten away from what I was really interested in, was that healing and power of those plants. So I went back to school for naturopathic medicine. And, a lot of my patients would always say, wow, it's really interesting that you had this science degree in chemical engineering. It's a shame you don't get to use that anymore. And I'm like, what? I use that every day. The skill set there of solving problems and analyzing data, it is really valuable. And I love and fully admit that I'm a total nerd when it comes to the biochemistry and immunology, the human body. And I'll spend hours and hours just geeking out on metabolic pathways and cellular metabolism. So when I learned about mistletoe, I first learned about the power of it, its clinical effectiveness. And the more I get into it, the more I could appreciate the entire plant. the way that I used to love these plants when I was so young. And all of this sort of, even now, unquantifiable contribution from the plant. But then the science part of me is just loving all the research that is coming out. And I really wanted to be able to bring that forward to the community and try to highlight that so we can understand it's, yes, we're getting great results, and the science is starting to catch up with our understanding of how that's happening. So how it all, over all these decades, it's quite mysterious, but I just try to keep letting it unfold. My relationship with plants, my relationship to healing, and this book, I think, is a great launching pad for that to continue. So
Great, thank you. Thank you. Stephen, Dr. Johnson, you'll have to unmute yourself, or I can do it perhaps. Let me see. Can you unmute?
There we-
Oops. Oh, darn, I just muted him again.
How about now? Okay, sorry about that. I'm in upstate New York, up near Chatham, New York, back where I first started so many years ago in 1996 when I took over Philip Incao's practice, a very beloved anthroposophic physician. And I guess there's many things I could say about my journey to the book personally, but I would just say it feels like my role in all this has been to be more of a bridge builder, which I think has often been throughout my biography, I think. I remember when I was a couple of years ago over in Switzerland, and I was at the Clinic Arlesheim where Dr. Marian Debus, who's one of our faculty, was there, and went to her and said, we really need a mistletoe and an integrative oncology training course in the US. Mistletoe is getting well known and a lot of people are practicing, but it doesn't seem like they really always know what they're doing. And so could you guys come over and help set up a course? Because I thought, yeah, all the great European clinics and integrative models, better they do it. But of course, what I got was, well, yeah, it sounds great. Go do it yourself. So that's how it all started, and kind of went back and talked to Naisha and talked to Paul and Peter Hinderberger and each one of you sitting here, and everyone said yes. Everyone was willing to give up their time and give up space in their lives to put together the course, right? Which is where this all started down in Baltimore, was we had our first integrative oncology and mistletoe training, and we really wanted it to reflect the terrain of how mistletoe is practiced integratively in this country. It's a lot different than Europe, I think, because we have many different practitioners, some very well versed in anthroposophic medicine, some in naturopathic medicine and other forms of medicine. So the course, as much as we could in the curriculum, we really tried to reflect that. And it just felt like everyone was willing to do their part and contribute their expertise. And I think from the course, both in training physicians around the country now, we've hit 250 physicians, right? As well as extensive mentoring. And I think this book was, really kind of an answer to say, well, here's a professional, what we hope had a lot, a book with a lot of integrity, that could really lay the foundation and the groundwork for how mistletoe is practiced today in this country, and hopefully it could be a stepping stone for clinics and more professional centers in the future. And we try to take on, this challenge of writing a book that's both for patients and an intro book for doctors, which is quite a difficult thing to do. But so far the feedback we got was we did okay with that. I don't know what else to say. Maybe we did great. I don't know. Maybe we did just okay. But it seems like we've pulled it off. And so I'm just really excited that we got this far, and that everyone, just came together in this way that we could do it together.
Great. Thank you, Steve.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah. Dr. Blanning, Adam, if you could unmute yourself and
Good evening. Yeah.
yeah, hi.
Hi, sorry I came a few minutes late. I'm so glad to be here. Let's see, I'm in Denver, Colorado. And I'm a little confused because Mark said that he wrote, or he got to write the most fun chapter. And that's what I was going to say. And I suspect that actually everybody is kind of smiling and nodding because I think everybody, it's like asking who's your favorite child if you have children. I hope usually it's the one who's sitting in your lap because that's the one you love the most. So one of the really fun parts of teaching and writing in this collective book, I think, is that everybody got to write about their favorite chapter, their favorite topic. And that enthusiasm kind of comes through. I have one chapter that it's in the middle of the book, and it's about warmth. And one of the most fun things, I think, in terms of integrative and anthroposophic medicine is there are ideas and there are frameworks, and they can seem very conceptual. But actually, if you do a little digging, you can find that these things are being demonstrated in the world all the time. We just don't usually put the pieces together. So that chapter on warmth tries to look at kind of a fixed or a physical way of looking at warmth, and then a functional, flexible way, and then different types or archetypes of warmth, and then more of a spiritual aspect. And I sort of got interested when I started learning things like the insula, the part of your brain that's related to physical warmth perception. You can see it light up on a functional MRI. It also lights up if you are thinking generous moral thoughts about another person. And then I heard somewhere that in very practiced people who do meditation, if they get distracted and then they come back to their focus, the insula also lights up. So there's kind of these bridges where we're working in multiple places, multiple ways. And maybe that helps explain why mistletoe is really helpful for quality of life and people's overall well-being, that they feel physical effects and they feel emotional and spiritual effects. And so that exploration for me was great fun. And I was honored to be able to contribute it to the book.
Thank you, Adam.
Yeah.
I believe that's everyone. We have everyone introduced, and we know where everyone is. Wait, did you say where you are, Adam?
Yeah, I'm in Denver, Colorado.
Good, good. All right. So with that, I would just say to everyone out there participating, thanks for the questions that have come in so far. And I don't need that because I've got it right here. We're actively compiling a list of those, and I think we'll just launch into it. I think I'm seeing some that are pretty straightforward, short. There are some technical questions, and then there's some personal questions. And I think those will be, that will kind of be the order. I think we want to look at some broader orientation to begin with. We'll see about individual care questions. But one question I noticed that came up during the fly on the wall. There's always this fly on the wall session at the beginning of these Zoom meetings. I don't know how you can do it. Is because we're trying to set it all up, and then there's everyone's coming on board and they can hear us. And so someone was like, Naisha was talking to Paul, they were like, what are you talking about, this Johns Hopkins trial? What's that? So, and all the panelists, you're all welcome to unmute yourself and keep yourselves unmuted, I think from now on. But so what are you talking about? Johns Hopkins trial?
So I might be able to speak to that. I think probably everyone could speak a little bit to it on this group, but I helped. A little context is the first time I presented at a Mistletoe conference was in 2014 in Germany. And I was really nervous because I found out in the audience there were researchers and clinicians from places like Johns Hopkins and Sloan Kettering. And I was still at that time in my education and career feeling really shy around those environments. I feel more at home now in those places because I realize we are all on the same path and our same desire to help our patients no matter how. And so it doesn't really matter what the title or the institution is that's wrapped around you. But ultimately I was a little bit nervous. And I also that same year started moving out of just subcutaneous application of mistletoe. And for the first time started using it as an IV therapy in my clinic in September of 2014. And about 3 months into that process, I get a phone call from the person who ended up writing the foreword to our book, who was at that time the chief investigator at the Hopkins trial, Dr. Oh my gosh, I just can't believe I just blanked out here. Luis Diaz, who is now actually the head of solid tumor oncology at Sloan Kettering. But I get this call from him that basically said, we've been watching you, and we were initially going to run a phase 1 clinical trial on stage 4 pancreatic cancer inoperable with subcutaneous injections. But after listening to the conference and after hearing that you haven't killed anyone with IV therapies, we're interested in going back to the drawing board and seeing we can redo our IRB. And so I helped in the redirection of their focus of their research, which became an IV application of mistletoe therapies for all solid tumor types that were stage 4 that had quote unquote been failed by other aspects of standard of care. So it changed sort of within a matter of months. And that trial kicked off, oh my gosh, a couple years after that, and just came to its conclusion, a safety trial, a phase 1 safety trial, I believe just in the fall, like right at the end of the summer, or actually this past summer. And it's going to take us a few months to get all of the writings up before they can move into phase 2. But this is a really big deal for the United States to have an IV mistletoe study on our own soil in a really respected institute. It was funded by philanthropic donations. It was not an NIH funded study or otherwise, in academic funded study, but it's moving forward and it's looking good to be able to move into the phase 2 and beyond. So that's all we can say so far, because you can't really talk about a study till it comes completely into publication. But that's really exciting. But I hope for those of you who are new to mistletoe or new to this experience and new to this book, we get all excited and proud about it in the United States, but I would love for my colleagues to speak about the volumes of amazing research that's been going on for decades abroad, both from subcutaneous to intravenous to intratumoral to intraperitoneal and beyond, that we hopefully load up the book with a lot of those resources for you to explore yourself, that this is not something that new and innovative, really. We're kind of just bringing it to your awareness. So I'd love to hear from the tribe.
I would just say also to add that it is really difficult to raise money for studies on mistletoe because it's not a pharmaceutical drug, right? And good studies cost millions upon millions of dollars. And there's even some other prospective studies in line in the docket if we could raise money. There are some studies already written up on glioblastoma and some other things that are ready to go. If anyone knows anyone with a couple $1 million, let us know. But I think that's been the biggest challenge of all is there's over 100 studies on mistletoe. And I think the studies on quality of life and improving quality of life care and reducing side effects of other conventional interventions is pretty solid. And then there's still many, many studies on the efficacy of mistletoe, But to do trials that are large enough and in academic institutions where they can really be accepted sort of at the level of a large double placebo-blind study is very difficult. There's probably about 6 or 8 studies that are accepted as being really good. And then, maybe 80 studies that are kind of on the B level, they call it, But there's so many good studies, but probably the best one coming down the pipe right now is on bladder cancer infusions. They're having some really good results with some studies on that over in Germany. So I'd say that's a trial that's going on that's looking really promising for transitional cell cancer. But there are numerous small studies. I would just point that out. I don't want to go on and on. I think we tried in the book to outline many of them, and there's resources for people to look them up as well in the book. So I'd just add that part.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Would anyone else like to speak to the Johns Hopkins? If not, I can go to another question. And this is I'll just read this one. Pretty specific. It's asking about being in remission, so-called remission. Does or can mistletoe be a preventative to as far as recurrence and metastasis? Further, could someone use mistletoe without having cancer as a preventative? And this is a good question, and a good question asker. And is mistletoe only available in ampules, but not in oral form? That's maybe we'll just start. Yeah, maybe that was too much for one. But I think the preventative question, I think, would remission and preventative. Is that part of the picture?
Happy to start to chime in on this one. So I'll start with the remission. We absolutely, advocate for the periodic use of mistletoe during any, remission period. And, that's something that really depends on the individual's case, how aggressive or proactive you want to be. But we say a minimum of once a year, often in the springtime, to go through a course of mistletoe injections again. And, often people will do it twice a year, sometimes even more than that, just depending on where they are. And if they're, more in a high risk category, we don't really even take those breaks. We just sort of keep the therapy ongoing until we feel there's a greater safety margin. Again, that would be highly individualized based on a lot of factors, primarily the clinical presentation and, history. In terms of the question of preventative or proactive, this has come up before, and we don't have good data on this. It's really hard. You need a lot of people to be able to say, because so few are going to go on to develop cancer, and you'd have to have so many doing it to be able to differentiate the people that did it proactively didn't get those cancers. But I think just my hypothesis is absolutely, knowing how it stimulates the immune system and, causes it to be more effective, and sort of the mistletoe will go on a search and destroy mission for hidden cancer cells and help to highlight and reveal those to your own immune system. It's a teacher to your immune system. So I do think there's a role for prevention for people who may have identified germline mutations, like BRCA1 and 2. I would definitely consider that as part of a proactive therapy. For people who have very strong family histories, I would absolutely do that. So, but it's wide open for us to still understand that. So, anybody else has anything to add to those?
Just ditto. Pretty easy, yeah.
I think one of the parts I would say is I do with my patients look at things like are there signs where immune regulation is broken down? You know, one of the concepts we mention a lot in the course, and I think it's mentioned in the book, is immune surveillance.
Mhm.
This idea that mistletoe supports those cells in our body that recognize when cells are mutating or making changes that are maybe moving towards a malignant cell. And this even goes back to Adam's chapter on warmth, right? If you have patients who've been on a lot of antibiotics, always suppress their colds and fevers, haven't had fevers, who you see a lot of regulatory breakdown, poor digestion, poor sleep, poor relationship to normal physiologic rhythms, plus family history and things like that, we're really not looking at the origin of cancer as just something that just happens by pure chance. I mean, there of course are genetic components and viral components, but it's also a constitutional, picture as well, that if certain regulatory processes in the body are breaking down and the things that promote immune surveillance, like fever, like going through an illness in a healthy way, are not taking place, then we're more at risk for cancer, because it's a systemic disease. At least we tend to look at it more as a systemic disease, not an isolated event. So in those situations, one might think about mistletoe or, other medicines that come out of, that's a big part of holistic and integrative medicine, is there's other kind of medicines that you could say are complementary to mistletoe. Maybe use mistletoe or something that has properties that are similar to try to be preventative and proactive for cancer. So I would just say that's very much a part of the picture. Yeah.
That's good. I'm curious if it would be please, Adam, please.
Well, I was just going to say that it's also just looking at individualized response. Because I know some people who have said, I'd really love to use this prophylactically because it's so good. And you start with a little bit and they start getting big migraines and body aches, and say, okay, your body seems very reactive. You probably don't need this medicine. So I don't know that it should be in the water for everybody, but
really good point.
the thing Stephen is talking about in terms of these other stresses and strains, that's a lot of life right now. So the warming process is great.
Mm-hmm.
Go ahead, Naisha. Yeah.
Well, I'm glad that you brought that up too, because we have, even among our own circle, we were asked this question among the authors. And I think I'm glad that you brought up the other side, that you also don't want to put this in a hyperactive, just willy-nilly into a hyperactivated state. And so I think Stephen really drew the picture for us, really painted that picture for us of what that compromised patient might look like. And I really appreciate that you brought in the sort of pendulum, the other side of that we might want to take pause before thinking we should just administer this willy-nilly. So I'm glad that you brought that up too, because I think there's that tendency in our culture. It's like, wow, that's good. A lot more is better, or we should all be taking it. And that's where I thought maybe just before we answer a few more questions, because I'm seeing them coming through here. Do you guys mind if I just briefly read our table of contents? Because I'm finding that this book landed in my physical hands on Thursday last week. I've had it now in my paws for just over a week. And so it's really new. So I don't expect that any of you have even purchased it or have read it yet. But a lot of these questions, why we wrote this book, probably a bigger why, is because we get so many of these questions, and we have so many now patients being aware of it and demanding access to it, and so many physicians that are brand new to training with it, that we thought we needed the bridge, as Stephen has talked about, to create. So let me just give you a quick lowdown of what's in here, so that this might compel you to realize that a lot of your questions go into deep detail. We'll of course brush over them tonight, but they go into deep detail in the chapter. So the very beginning is just the history of mistletoe itself and modern oncology. And then honestly, I wish I had this course when I was in medical school, which is Paul's chapter on immunology. Even those of you who are not scientists and medical professionals, this will paint a picture for you to understand why this medicine is so powerful and why it's really relevant while we're putting all of our research dollars into immune therapies today. So I think Paul did a great job there. The state of current mistletoe research. This is one I even just got a question from a naturopathic colleague today asking me, hey, is there any studies out there? And like, yes, a lot. In fact, that entire chapter kind of brings you up to speed, as well as the how many hundreds of references at this point throughout the book, plus the resources we put on the website, themistletoebook.com, that's continuing adding the research. That's just in part one. That's just the landscape of mistletoe. And then part two dives into more the clinical practice, which is the host trees. So a lot of people are asking about the host trees, and that's something we spend entire weekends training people on this. So it's hard to answer in a quick question tonight. But Dr. Hinderberger did a beautiful job really articulating the differences between the host trees and which one to choose for which situation. And then we dive into sort of understanding the terrain, being able to explore it a bit more to know which patients are even a candidate for this therapy and when and why and how. And that's based on the test, assess, address chapter of 5. And then we move into the beautiful sort of story of this medicine that goes into part 3, which is the physiology of warmth. And this answers so much, like somebody asked a question about the desired sort of cytokine reaction, the redness that, hey, when you're looking at a thermography, you see red and that sort of signifies danger. And yet we're trying to invoke that. They're different. And I think Adam does a brilliant job explaining what he means by this concept really beautifully in that chapter. I go back to this chapter a lot in my own thought process and my own practice. And I think it's going to be probably one of the strongest chapters to help you guys understand mistletoe in general. And so I love that it's woven into the middle of the book because it's the glue for all of these conversations. And then constitutional care, this goes into the bigger picture that Peter dives into. And then Stephen takes people on an even deeper journey to understand that there's actually a lot more than just mistletoe. And then talking about the other therapies outside of anthroposophical medicine that play well with this, we talk about that, such as hyperthermia, I saw was a question, or IV vitamin C, or nutritional interventions. And then in part 4, it's the weaving it all together and those special applications that get more into the nuances. Now, in private practice, you can't possibly do justice in a book for the nuances that are required to have success with this therapy. And so please know that you're not going to walk away from this call tonight or reading this book and be an expert at either prescribing or at asking for what you need, but it gives you an idea on those nuances. And that's where Mark goes into the unique scenarios, the advanced disease and end of life care. Stephen goes into that just exquisitely. And then just kind of what's in the future. What do we hope to do for future research and future hospitals and future educational training and resources for all of you. And the appendix really does have the basics of mistletoe administration. So sort of the how to do the injection, as well as a few other really powerful informational pieces on the host trees itself and how to differentiate. So I just wanted to give the listeners a lay of the land, because really a lot of the questions are exactly what we wrote this book to, which makes me very proud. I think we nailed it, guys. I think we I think we were anticipating the questions coming in. So I'm sorry to take that up, but I thought that might be helpful while we have so many questions coming in that are so specific, and yet they are really written beautifully throughout this book. Anything else to add?
That's great. Thank you, Naisha. You're absolutely correct. I think, yeah, a lot of these questions would be answered by reading the book, and yet it's also nice to have
Human.
have some virtual human contact with the authors themselves. And yeah. No, but thank you. That it's such a wonderful grounding book, which is, that was one question that I, just looking at the questions is also just because this is so, I mean, it's a book that is of great interest, I think, to practitioners, and it's of great interest to anyone with an intelligent and open mind, and it's a wonderful. Shall I keep asking questions?
Yeah, absolutely. I just wanted to give that so people are feeling like, well, they're not getting to my question. I wanted them to know that they can go back to it too. So good.
Great.
There's even an intro, right, Naisha, though, at the very beginning, that's kind of a guide to reading the book. So if you're a practitioner versus a patient, if you're looking for specific things, it might help guide you which chapters are a little easier for patients and which ones are a little easier, maybe a little more professional for doctors. Not that you can't read them all, but it gives you a little expectation of what's coming in each chapter.
Yeah. Cool.
Mhm. I actually was going to throw this question out there, which Naisha just referred to, and maybe it would be Adam. I know because he wrote the warmth chapter. But the question goes, in a thermography, the heated areas are red flags for the potential of cancer to develop in the future. Regarding mistletoe, the injection of mistletoe creates an inflammation or redness and warmth, which creates a healing. One heat indicates a problem and one heat indicates the cure or healing. Please comment.
Okay, well, I can start and then other people are welcome to jump in. Well, I think it's, so when you're doing a test, we've sort of got good, bad, yes, no answers to things.
Mm.
There's one level of warmth, and when we see this other type of warmth, then that's a problem. But if we're giving mistletoe and we're warming an area and it's showing the exact same pattern or a similar kind of pattern, but that's a good thing, that's confusing. So I think we have to think more about regulation and self-regulation and flexibility and adaptability of warmth. Almost any time physiologically that you have a process which is becoming independent or not well coordinated or integrated, then that's where it's more likely to get a problem like a tumor growth. And one of the great things about mistletoe is that it has this whole body effect so that you are stimulating warmth. And in the process, you are strengthening the immune and the warmth capacity for the body overall. So I think it's just a nice example of how we need to sometimes be flipping our thinking, that we can't just go more warmth is the problem, because sometimes therapeutically asking us to work more strongly on the thing that's a problem is actually the solution to getting it back into a balanced state.
Mm.
Who else would like to say something?
I'll chip in. I think in today's modern age, we sort of get into the habit of turbo integrative medicine, and we're like, oh, inflammation is bad. Okay, it causes Alzheimer's, it causes heart disease, it causes cancer and rheumatoid arthritis. And as Adam was saying, there's a finer way to look at it. And the thing that I appreciate is that we should differentiate between acute inflammation and chronic inflammation. That chronic inflammation, absolutely, if it's just sitting there and in a way, something that's not transformed, not overcome, and probably that's an acute inflammation, maybe a trauma that hasn't been overcome, then we're just kicking the can down the road, and that can cause problems down the road in our body. So there is a finer way to differentiate that. I haven't had a thermofield experience with this, although I'm very, very tempted, because I had a patient and a husband who we did a very exciting treatment. It was her 4th time dealing with a triple negative cancer. It was her 3rd recurrence. She'd had 2 surgeries in the same area, and there probably wasn't enough to do an easy surgery, and she was sort of tired of doing the same thing and it not working. So she came down and we did fever therapy, which is in the advanced chapter. Don't do this at home, but we did about 50 to 100 times the regular dose of mistletoe. She gets a fever she went home, her husband had just got this handy dandy infrared thermometer and her forehead was like 99.9, 100.1, barely fever. Her other underarm, where there was no tumor, was 102, so 102. And then he hit the place where there was the tumor, where there was nodes that were positive, and that was 105 degrees. And it wasn't that way before. We eventually did inject that with mistletoe, but this was just with fever therapy. So we're launching this immune inflammatory response that our body knows what to do. It has a wisdom, and those cells found where they needed to go. Our body knew where it needed to address, and it does that in the language of warmth. A beautiful, beautiful thing that, you know, I learned from a mechanic.
Amazing.
This is a question that keeps coming up, and I believe that there are resources in the book. And if you go to our the book page on the Steiner Books website, you can also see some links to organizations that are mentioned in the resources. But I think it's also worth just asking here, how would one go about finding a healthcare provider who is an expert in mistletoe therapy? Yeah, where can I find a directory of mistletoe practitioners? Stephen?
Yeah.
Sitting here thinking there isn't a perfect answer to that, because
Those are the best answers.
yeah, I mean, there are different places. I mean, certainly different practitioners will let you know through their website that they're using it. And so you might find it looking in your region if someone is offering it. And then it's always good to see, have they done some training? Because I think that is important. Believe Big has a small list. The Physicians Association for Anthroposophic Medicine has a practitioner list. Not everyone on it does mistletoe, but many do. But I don't know that yet there is sort of a universal directory that one could say. A lot of people are training and right now and gaining expertise, and there's a small group that has a lot of expertise, but this other group is coming along quickly, So I do think in the next, sounds like a weak answer, but in the next year or two, we'll probably have some better resources, with more doctors centralized, where you can find doctors who are practicing. But it's not a perfect situation. Maybe someone else can say something else to that, but that's kind of how it is at the moment.
And I think that's part of what we're hoping gets created on the mistletoebook.com and some of the collaborations that are happening between Uriel Pharmacy, Believe Big, the PAM organization, the MTI of Health organization, the Mistletoe Book, website. We really hope to become more of a hub and a resource, because we're relatively infants at this in the US. There's some pretty decent resources in Europe, but most of them are in German. And so difficult for us to access that unless you're Mark. So, we try, but yeah, so I think that was a good answer, that hopefully it's a work in progress, but at least you get a starting point on some of those recommended sites. And perhaps ask your physician, were they trained, with this? That's a starting point as well, because we definitely have seen as it's gaining some popularity, we're definitely seeing some folks that are kind of winging it. And this isn't really a therapy you want to wing. I don't know. That's my 2 cents. I don't know if my colleagues would feel otherwise. Yeah.
Absolutely. I think that's why we did the whole course of the book. That's the core reason. Yeah. So you're being kind.
I was not my usual expletive self. Reining it in for the audience. Yeah.
And there's a lot of mentoring going on now, a lot of effort going into mentoring. Naisha does a lot of mentoring. The course does a lot of mentoring. There's just a lot of different programs, individual mentoring going on, people working with different practitioners, some of us. And so it's coming along. So I do think in coming years, there'll be more resources. Yeah.
Nice. Yeah.
Thanks. That's and maybe this was maybe this would be a good opportunity to mention, or to give each of you or all of you an opportunity to mention some of these organizations that are being referred to right now. And this is also one of our questions about could somebody say something about the Believe Big Foundation, the role of the Believe Big Foundation, and Uriel Pharmacy in supporting mistletoe awareness in this country. And I think you could probably include PAM, the Physicians Association for Anthroposophic Medicine, and maybe there are others as well. But I know Naisha is Believe Big, and and so that's, yeah. So.
Well, I know that, we Believe Big has been instrumental in getting the research at Hopkins. I mean, they were the organization that got the research trial happening there. They're the people who raised the funds to make that happen. And then they also do a lot of other things. They create patient grants to help patients access mistletoe therapies, and they themselves are helping vet practitioners and create a good resource. And I know Stephen's really intimately involved with that. He's also involved with helping, and Stephen run with this, like on the educational piece. I mean, this is why we even have a educational platform, and why this book, as he mentioned, was birthed, is because we recognize the importance of creating kind of a best practices. And Stephen is really the driving force behind that. So maybe speak to what you're currently doing with Believe Big, Uriel.
I would just say that I think the most important thing about that, is that I'm very proud, isn't the word, but feel really good about, is that all of the organizations that are working right now in this direction, whether it be PAM, Adam's the director of PAM Educational Activities, Naisha is starting the Metabolic Institute. She's kind of still supports Believe Big, but she's kind of moving in her other direction. They're doing all kinds of work and training, Believe Big. A lot of doctors are inviting people down and starting real strong clinic initiatives like Mark and Peter Hinderberger, who's been working with Paul. But the nicest thing about it is all the organizations are cooperating,
100%.
Instead of everyone just going off into their own bubble. And so I think that's really good. So yes, there are a lot of different organizations. Uriel's really carries the mistletoe and tries to provide links for doctors to find ways to get training or help patients find doctors, and then, through these different resources, whether it's Metabolic Institute or PAM or Believe Big, people find their way to different doctors. It's a limited resource, but it's working. And I think we all counter refer to each other and try to let people know who's in what region. And I think that's the most important thing, that we're building networks. And I think because we want, in the end, we really want this therapy. It's so rare that an integrative or natural therapy gets done, maintains a kind of integrity that doesn't get taken over at a certain point, where it's so marketed and hyped that it kind of loses its professional integrity. And here I think we're really trying to maintain that for mistletoe and really get people who are trained well, and to organizations that are taking this up thoughtfully. And I think that's unique in how that's all happening around mistletoe. No one's trying to hype it up or overdo it. And at the same time, I think everyone's, trying to cooperate together. I hope that doesn't sound too vague. And it's forming, it's new. We only started the first training 3 years ago, 2.5, 3, right?
Summer 2019, because we were doing trainings before that, but it was through one of the mistletoe companies that was getting us out there, just doing some very small ones, but it never had the essence that it has now, which is this, like you said, the sort of unified front of bringing in all of the tribe, all the prescribers, all the people that are interested. So it's really taken on this new deep network feel, and more inclusive of not just one company, but multiple companies, and not just one medicine, but several medicines.
Exactly. Yeah. And of course we do that too. We don't represent just one company. So I hope that as this continues over the next few years, networks will get more solidified and more organized, so that it'll get easier and easier for patients, because everyone's really in it for the patients. I don't think anyone, at least here on the panel that I know of, is is in it just for themselves. So that's also a special that it started that way. It's not starting as like a financial project, really. Yeah.
Well, I have a question for everyone. I mean, we're talking about mistletoe as a therapy here, and I just think it's so interesting that that we have MDs, we have DOs, we have NDs. We're talking about a plant substance here. We don't have a homeopath, but so I just have a general question about. I mean, that's kind of an amazing thing, right? So this is, we're talking about treating cancer mostly with this plant substance. So, yeah, I mean, so like just coming in off the street, you're like, I mean, it's almost confusing. What is this? Like, what kind of therapy is this? Is this, it doesn't, in a way, it doesn't make sense. Like, this is this conventional medicine? So then we have to say, like, well, so then it raises the question, what is anthroposophic medicine? And then we could also say, what is naturopathy? I mean, those are just basic questions, but I think it might be useful just to address, like, if anyone wants to say that, Adam or Steve or Mark.
No, anyone, yeah.
What is anthroposophic medicine? I mean, in the elevator answer, and what is naturopathy? For nature and for Paul. Anyway, that's just my extemporaneous.
Beautiful.
So.
Yeah.
I can try an elevator. I'll think really fast here. No, I would say anthroposophic medicine, if you are trying to treat the whole human being and understand how the human being relates to the natural world and to spiritual growth and change, then you're going to get to a place which loves and appreciates natural treatments that work with the body's own capacities. I think what's kind of funny is probably we're all getting to the same place. We're just starting with slightly different viewpoints. But if you're really trying to build a whole person picture, you're going to end up in pretty much the same place. So anthroposophic medicine is one striving to create a whole person picture.
Wow. That was good.
Okay. Well,
That was, yeah. And this also speaks to, I think, it's Naisha's chapter towards the end about building bridges too, between the different approaches, Ayurvedic and everything, yeah. But I would like to hear something about from the Indies. Yeah.
Paul, you're on.
Okay, well, I don't really have an elevator description, but people often will ask, well, how are you different than my conventional doc, my primary care doc? And really, naturopathic medicine's roots come from the old nature cure practitioners, where they looked at the natural world and how they could use those resources and help people. And I think a founding principle is what we call the vis medicatrix naturae, which means the healing power of nature. And so in naturopathic medicine, we recognize and acknowledge this innate healing ability of the body. And that seems so fundamental, but it's so different from conventional medicine, where they don't even have a name for it. This is not unique to naturopathic medicine. Other cultures and disciplines call it prana or chi, life force. soul energy. It's that same thing. It's that unifying principle that opposes entropy. Like my table. If my table gets a scratch on it, that scratch will never fix itself, ever. And that's not like the human body. The human body, if I get a scratch, I don't even have to do anything. It knows how to heal itself. And we respect and we try to empower that ability. Sometimes it gets deranged. And so we look at what are those obstacles for the body to find its way again, back to its own healing. What ways can we gently support that process? And we kind of move up this order of therapeutics depending on where that patient is. Some patients are really aligned and they're just a little bit off the tracks. Other people, it has been decades of toxins in their body and abuse from medications, and their body has forgot how to heal itself, or it's pushed real far down. So we will use different tools to bring that up. But for me, as a practitioner, that's what I'm working with, is that innate healing ability of the patient. So
it's funny, this doesn't speak to anthroposophical or conventional or naturopathic, but I've always sort of thought of mistletoe as sort of the agnostic remedy. And one of our colleagues just put into the chat, Dr. Jade Wimberly, she said, this plant has blossomed new relationships with oncologists, primary care doctors for me over the past year. She's a naturopathic doctor, by the way. Mistletoe seems to speak across all aisles in medicine and allow a door to open for enhanced patient care. I think we should have that as a quote in the book and on the website. And that's really well said, because I think that's what we've all experienced ourselves. And I think that's been the biggest, sort of olive branch I've experienced in my own career of being able to communicate with my colleagues over all these years. It's really created a common language. It's really beautiful. So thanks for that input, Jade.
I think it's also important to remember, in anthroposophic medicine, it's always mentioned as an extension to modern medicine, not a replacement. And I think anyone who studies anthroposophic medicine, whether they're a naturopath or they're an MD, needs to have done a training, because the idea is really to extend what we do learn from modern medicine. There's a lot there to learn, and there's a lot there that's important. But of course, often there's a blindness to certain aspects of holistic healing and salutogenic healing. And I think we're sort of fighting for that. And right now, never has it been more of a fight. I think the whole vaccine issue and COVID has brought a huge rebound of sort of, anti-holistic thinking that, that breaks, that you're either natural thinker or you're a scientific thinker, you're an anti or you're a for, and that's just so wrong. It will be so sad if that's the outcome, because the one reason I think mistletoe as a remedy has made it a little further along in acceptance than some other remedies is because so much of it has been, it has some parts of it that can stand alone, but it also has a role with other medicines, and we give it adjunctively, and it can work with other natural medicines and other conventional medicines. And the whole idea is to find what's best for the patient. So I really hope we don't lose that, because I think that was also a thrust of the book, to try to make a case for that, and hopefully in a good enough way that people wouldn't just say, oh, you're just a bunch of, quacks, so to speak.
That's a badge of honor, Stephen.
Yeah. Quack emblem here.
Quack. Sorry.
No, it's beautiful. Yeah.
Yeah, beautiful. Thank you.
Sure.
I think that's really helpful. And I appreciate what you just said, Stephen, too. And Naisha, you beat me to the punch. I didn't know who wrote that comment, but I was just saying, oh, well, I was going to read that as well. This from Jade. Thank you. This mistletoe seeming to speak across all aisles in medicine and allowed a door to open for enhanced patient care. Because that's really, that was sort of the thought that I had in my last question is just this this really patient-centered approach, and yeah, it's really wonderful. And so yeah, we're at 8:15. We've been here an hour and 15 minutes. I'm probably going to want to close it up soon. I just want to say, yeah, there's a lot of case specific questions that we have. I don't know if we want to go into that. I mean, a little bit. I wanted to keep it more broad, but I can run through some of these questions before the end if the practitioners are open to that. Yeah.
I thought I saw this IV sub-Q question a lot. Would that, did you see that a lot also, John? Would that be something maybe to speak to?
That'd be a good one.
Yeah, I think that would be a good one. That's a little more, how does it get, the subcutaneous, this is also, I guess, an unusual thing, the subcutaneous injection versus intravenous. I mean, that's a big, yeah, that would be good to speak to that.
Yeah.
I don't, yeah, there was a few questions. When do you upgrade to mistletoe by IV from sub?
I was just going to say really quick to that, and I was thinking of throwing it to Mark, but that I do think there's a tendency in the Western world to always think that more is always better. And just want to say that there's a lot of good results with just using sub-Q mistletoe, and you can't always do IVs forever. And IVs have a role because in higher doses, we can get more lectins, maybe a bit more of this apoptosis effect, which is, toxicity to the cancer cells themselves versus the immune modulating effect that we get with the injections, which is very strong. Doesn't mean you can't also get tumor apoptosis with injections. But it's just important to remember it's where the body responds. That theme has been here. And the question is with whether you're doing metabolic medicine or you're doing nutritional medicine and you're trying to clean up the terrain, how things are changing in the person's soul or personal life, and then how one's working with the therapies, what brings about the change, that the fact that a change takes place in the immune system is what's important. How you get there can be very varied. But that being said, there are some very specific reasons sometimes, I think, to do IVs and intratumoral injections and so on. And I think some of us here do them, but I know Mark's been doing a lot with that right now. So maybe, Mark, you want to say something to that?
Sure. Thanks, Stephen. Yeah. Well, to speak to what you said, I mean, I had a patient today that was there for the first time and had a fortunately very, very early cancer. And I told him, look, I don't see a need for you to do IV therapy. I mean, the only reason I would do it is if you felt in your heart, you really, really, really wanted to do that for this because it just made you feel like you were, doing everything you could. But the sub-Q is going to carry you all the way I would want to, and give you all the benefits that I think mistletoe can give you. And on the other hand, there's, the question as to when to give IV. I always think of IV when the cancer is spread into lymph nodes or it's spread beyond nodes into a metastatic situation. And then we can also do other more advanced things with intravenous, like cause a fever or support other things we're doing, such as intratumoral injections. And it's something that can be quite powerful. And at the same time, we have other patients that with the subcutaneous, they don't feel as supported with even the conventional chemotherapy that they're on. And I've had remarkable situations where the patient was getting a 5-FU and oxaliplatin and just having a terrible time with it. And then they found our practice and we started doing IV mistletoe. And it was a beautiful thing. Their young teenage son said, "Hey mom, look, you need to go in and get that mistletoe because it's clear, before this, you were sick for 3 days, getting IV rehydration. Like, I don't have a mom. And now, you rest for half the day and you're back at it." And it was just night and day, the difference between the side effects. So there was this way of feeling held and supported from doing the intravenous mistletoe. So there's a lot of different clinical situations that I would think of using it.
Thanks, Mark. So this question has been asked a few times, so I just want to go ahead and articulate it about contraindication for being pregnant and taking mistletoe.
Kind of added in because I thought I wanted to address that because I saw that she'd asked that question, and because there's no studies, we don't know. But I have had myself historically patients who were on mistletoe and then got pregnant and maintained their mistletoe throughout their pregnancy because they'd already been on it and were able to conceive. And because they were actually dealing with a cancering process or a really recent remission of that, we sort of outweighed. We did a very good informed consent and sort of outweighed. And she had a very, very healthy, robust pregnancy and delivery, and both she and the baby are still thriving, and she's actually cancer-free. And so that's my N of one experience. But we're always very, very careful and cautious when we talk about our pregnant and our little people applications. And so I would definitely personally not recommend starting on mistletoe 6 months, early on into a pregnancy or throughout pregnancy as a new therapy. I don't know, maybe my other colleagues have experience with it, but my own experience says maybe a little caution there.
Yeah. There's one very small study, and I'm sorry I don't have it in front of me, and I apologize if I have the exact number wrong. I think it was 14 or 16 patients. So very small, more like a case study where pregnant patients received mistletoe. There was one premature stillbirth, but there were other reasons why that could have happened. So it was hard to say. So at least there it was shown it can be done. But I think nowhere is there any large study or would anyone say, oh, it's just absolutely safe to take it. I would say it's usually only done in where there's not many other choices or one feels compelled to have to give it a try. But that would be my addition to that. Any other thoughts on that? Because it is a tough one and it does come up.
Thank you, Steve. Thank you, Naisha. Well, I'm having a lot of fun, but I do want to stick to my schedule, and I know that everyone has things to do in life. I want to read a comment from Dr. Jemmett. Thank you for your comment. She says, "Thank you all for being courageous, trailblazing, caring physician souls. Grateful for your mentoring." And that same sentiment is totally felt by me. I'm really grateful for all your work in the world, and I'm really thankful that this project sort of came to Steiner Books, Portal Books, as we publish it under our imprint. But it's something that I've known about, and it's something that I talked about with a fellow named Gene Goligly before he died almost a year ago. So it was going to take another direction into the world, but it sort of came back to Gene's true home, which was if you knew him, it was Steiner Books for 20 years. And so anyway, so I'm grateful to all of you. I'm grateful that that we have this book. It's available, steinerbooks.org. It's at the top of the page, new, and available from all your local or multinational booksellers. So that's what I have to say about it. And if anyone else has any closing thoughts, we can do a short go round and then say goodbye.
Just grateful. Thank you all.
Yeah, echo that. Thank you, everyone, for your time.
Yeah, I hope this was a help for some of you who had questions, and look forward to what will happen in the future.
Yeah, thank you. I'm so honored to be here and grateful, and I look forward to changing the world and seeing how we can do it together.
And get people to buy the book. What's interesting is all the proceeds go towards more research and more education about mistletoe. No, none of the authors are making money off of this book. It's all being donated to furthering and growing this activity.
And it's looking good so far. It's our top seller, definitely, hands down.
Yeah, awesome.
Great.
All
Great.
Thank
right.
you all. Thanks so much.
Thank you to all the doctors. Thank you to everyone who has been listening, and all your comments and all your questions. Look, stay tuned for our next book webinar. All right. Bye-bye.
Be well.
Bye, everyone.
Bye-bye.